You've likely seen similar pieces at thrift stores, or maybe you have one in your own home. It still does have good bones. It was solid wood, and we're going to use this as our base for our new modern look, so we don't have to start from scratch. By the time this is finished, you won't even recognize it.
So we're curious. Drop a number 1 down in the comments if you've seen these around, and drop a number 2 if you have one in your own home before. The first thing we're going to do is remove all the decorative trim work so we have nice straight lines to work with. Starting on the bottom trim, we flipped it upside down to work on it a little bit easier. Getting into pieces like this, you never know exactly how they're put together. This has a little bit of wood glue and nails, but we were able to break it off with a hammer.
And while it's upside down, we're going to use our drill to remove the top surface of the nightstand. We're also removing the cleats that the screws were driven into, so we can use these for supports when we put the top back on. They came off pretty easily using the 5-in-1 painter's tool and a hammer. You can see that they were secured with a little wood glue and nails.
And this is a look at what we're left with. Our plan is to modify this with really clean and simple lines. There will be an open shelf just under the top surface and a drawer underneath. Now we're going to measure the remaining top section and set up the table saw to quickly cut the sides down. We did need to remove the sliding drawer hardware for this step. Then we flipped the nightstand upside down and removed these corner braces, which we're going to hang on to create stability later. Again, we used the painter's tool to pry them loose. And now that those have been removed, we set up the table saw and cut the 2 sides off so we were left with more of a square shape.
Rather than using the cleats we saved, it seemed like it would be quicker to just make our own instead of pulling out all of those nails. So we used the scraps of wood that we cut off from the sides, and then we just cut them to size. Then we used the previous cleat as a pattern to mark where the screws will go. We clamped them to the table and drilled 3 pilot holes into each cleat. Then we used a countersink drill bit to create a recessed area so the screws will be concealed. Then we gave the frame and the mounting pieces a good sanding. We started with an 80 grit piece to knock down the stain and any ridges quickly, and then followed it with a 220 grit sanding.
Now we're going to install the new cleats into place. To do this, we're running a bead of wood glue along each edge. Then we used clamps to hold them in place as we drove 1 1/4 brads into each to secure them to the base of the nightstand. Then we decided to create a new backing piece for the top shelf section so it's closed off. We looked through our supply of scrap wood and found a piece of baseboard that was the perfect width. So we just needed to trim it down to the right length. Then we used our Kreg pocket jig to drill pocket holes so we can secure this onto the back side of the nightstand so you won't see any screws. We applied wood glue on each end and placed it into the back opening. Then we used several clamps to hold it into place while we drove each screw into the pocket holes. Not only did this close off the top shelf area, but it also added more stability to the whole piece.
Now we're going to cut down a piece of scrap plywood to create the shelf piece. We took the measurements of the opening and transferred them to the piece of wood. Now plywood tends to chip easily when cutting, so we've learned that if you place a piece of painter's tape where you're going to make the cut, it minimizes the edges from chipping. Now that the 2 sides have been cut down to size, we're going to cut a little more off of the front so that it will fit perfectly inside the nightstand. Again, we marked it with painter's tape and cut it down to size. Then Steph drilled 4 pocket holes on each side so that the shelf will be nice and sturdy.
We decided to get the top of the nightstand installed before we secured the shelf piece into place so we would have a little bit more room to work. We're using the same top the piece originally had, but we're trimming the decorative edges off to create a more modern look. We want the top to be flush to the sides, so we measured the width of the nightstand and set up the fence on the table saw. Then we ran the top through on each side and the front for a nice squared off look. Once it was cut to size, we applied wood glue around the top of the nightstand and spread it out to cover the entire surface. Then we placed the nightstand upside down onto the top piece we trimmed down. And finally, we drove the screws down through the cleats into the top piece of wood. We're ready to put this shelf into place now, and so what we're doing is just filling up the void here to get it to the right height, because we want, this is upside down right now, just so we could get our screws in a little bit easier. So we're trying to build up this surface so the shelf is nice and flush with this edge. So when it's flipped over to the top, that's the top of the shelf. So we're just going to use those and another scrap piece of wood. Which is like near perfection. You can see that's right where we need it to be in the back. And
it goes towards the front.
Yes. And it's a little loose here, but we'll just hold that up tight while we secure the screw.
Before we install the shelf in place, we're applying wood glue on all 4 sides, which in all honesty might be a little overkill, especially since we're securing it into place with the pocket hole screws. But as you know from previous videos, that Steph's kids can be pretty rough on furniture. It only took an extra minute to apply the glue, and now we know it will be super secure. Chime in down in the comments and let us know if you think we're going overboard with the glue.
Once the glue was spread around, we slid the shelf piece into place. I started by installing the screw at the front of the shelf on the left side, then moved to the right, and held the filler board tight against the shelf to make sure it was level with the front edge of the nightstand. After the 2 front screws were installed, I continued to install the remaining screws, working my way back on each side. Here's our moment of truth to see how we did. Well, it is snug, isn't it? That's good. Here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, good, because I can't see it yet. Did I do good, kids? Overall, the fit was pretty good considering we're making this all up as we go along. We just took a piece of sandpaper to smooth the transition from the front edge of the nightstand to the shelf surface. Then I caulked in all 4 edges to prep it for paint. That's it for the build of the base. Now we're going to focus on the drawer.
Once again, the nightstand originally started with a very traditional and dated look. Steph really didn't want to leave the existing drawer front like it was. She didn't like the curved detail edge and was hoping to make the drawer inset so that it would be flush with the front of the nightstand rather than covering the front edges. So the first thing we're going to do is to straighten up all the edges on the drawer front. We didn't have much wiggle room here, but we were able to take off just what we needed to make sure that each side was cut the same. We set up the fence on the table saw and ran each side through.
Again, the corner braces were installed earlier to add stability. We also decided to add an additional brace to the bottom, not only to increase the overall stability of the nightstand, but to act as a brace for the drawer slide. We're using another scrap piece that was cut off the original nightstand and cut it to fit just inside the frame. Then we used the Kreg jig again to make pocket holes on each side. We applied wood glue to both edges and clamped it into place by clamping a board flush to the frame first. Then we installed the screws and secured the brace into place.
Since we're going for an inset drawer and the nightstand will be mounted to the wall, we needed to shorten the drawer slide. Instead of being mounted on the frame as it was before, it will need to be placed just inside the new brace that we installed. So Steph is sliding it back into place and marking the back with some painter's tape so that she'll know exactly where it needs to be cut off. And we don't really know of a better way of cutting metal than with a hacksaw, so that's what we're going to try. If you have a better tool or suggestion, let us know in the comments.
It took a bit of time to finally cut through the whole drawer slide, but it did the trick. Then I drilled new holes at the back end and secured it into place with the original screws. Now let's finish off the drawer by giving it some style. We're going to add a really fun angled design using 3/4 inch pine screen molding. First, we need to fill in the holes from the hardware, so I mixed up some Bondo and sanded it smooth once it had hardened. Then I set up the miter saw for a 15-degree angle and cut 6 strips down to about 11.5 inches with a right angle and 6 strips a little shorter with a left angle, and lightly sanded any rough edges.
Then we did a dry fit using 1/8-inch tile spacers in between each piece, which was the perfect spacing for our design across the height of the drawer. Once we knew the spacing was okay, we applied wood glue to the back of each strip and placed it onto the drawer front. Steph started with the top of the drawer and worked her way down, placing the spacers as she went. After each board was perfectly spaced out, we secured each strip down using 1 1/4 inch brads. Then we used the table saw to trim off the excess screen molding. It was pretty easy to do by placing the drawer upside down and using the edge of the drawer as our guide. Then Steph used the orbital sander to sand off the outside edges and make them smooth. And last, we used plastic wood filler on each of the brad holes and seams and sanded them smooth once dry.
While the design on the drawer was drying, we sanded down the remaining 2 sides and top of the nightstand with a 220 grit sandpaper. And now we can finally paint this piece and get it installed in this modern bedroom makeover. I wanted a nice smooth finish free from brush marks, so we're using spray paint. And in all honesty, I thought this would be the easiest way to paint inside the shelf area without getting paint all over myself. First, we wiped down the entire piece with a damp cloth to remove any remaining dust and masked off the inside of the drawer. Then I applied 1 coat of gray primer and allowed to dry. Now, primer can often raise the wood grain and make your wood feel a little bit bumpy. So I used a 220 grit sandpaper and gave a very light sanding and wiped away all the dust again. Then I applied 2 coats of black spray paint in a satin finish. After letting the paint cure for a day or 2, we can finally get this installed on the wall. So we have our nightstand ready. We're ready to get it hung on the wall today. I'm just gonna flip it around and show you how we're gonna do that. So we're gonna use these French cleats to hang this on the wall. I think they're rated to hang about 80 pounds, so it's pretty substantial, and this is nothing near that heavy. One thing to notice on these, I don't know if you can read that. This one says it's for the frame, and then this one is for the wall. So this is the one we're going to hang on the wall. This is the one we're going to hang on the back of the nightstand. I have already pre-drilled some pilot holes there, and once this piece is secured on the wall, it will be flat, and then they'll meet up like that.
You flip the piece around. That's the way. Yes.
Okie dokie. It's a little puzzle, guys. But you can see how they will hook inside, and it is going to be really sturdy. We're going to secure these into the wall, into the studs, and we're going to secure that to the back of the nightstand with 4 screws. So that thing's not going anywhere. So I'm just going to put the screws in now. Now that we have the top piece installed, I'm going to put up this wall piece, hold it where it will be, and then we'll measure to the bottom of it and then to the bottom of the nightstand to know where I need to mark it on the wall. So we want to have clearance. We're going to build some drawers for more storage on this side of the bed eventually. So we're going to hang the nightstand so it is about level with the top of this, so we still have access to the drawers. So I've measured that distance to the top of here and added that to the dimension with where our cleats are going to be, and I've already marked the wall. And so we're going to use our laser level to get a nice straight line, and then we'll put that cleat piece on our wall.
Now we use the stud finder to mark the wall, and we were really hoping we would be able to secure it into 2 studs, but we only found one right in the center of the nightstand. So we're going to use the level that comes with the cleat, and we're going to mark 2 additional holes on each side. And then we'll have to use some wall anchors to secure those holes for added stability.
After getting that final cleat piece installed on the wall, we can hang the nightstand and we're finished. It was quite the journey taking this old dated furniture and completely transforming it into this modern floating nightstand. It's completely unrecognizable now. Projects like this are always so rewarding to tackle. Taking something old or dated and imagining a whole new design. Then watching it take shape with each step and finally seeing your vision come to life when it's completely finished.
This project may look intimidating, but taking it step by step and with the help of a few tools, you too can DIY your own floating nightstand from an old piece of furniture. Let us know if this project seems doable down in the comments and if you would have done anything else differently. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for watching. Up next, we're anxious to finally share the entire room reveal for this extreme bedroom makeover. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you're the first one to know when our new videos come out. And as always here at Sunnyside Design, we hope to bring your home to the sunny side of the street. We'll see you in the next one.
Tile spacers in between each pace. That's hard to say. She shook her. Then Steph used the orbital sander to smash. And at last, and at last, we used plastic.
Oh, wait, start over. We were laughing.
Oh, gosh. Okay.